Welcome back. Shares of Shopify are up today and on pace for their best month ever, although they're still 50% below their 2021 levels. Black Friday sales, record highs for the platform, up 22%, far outpacing the 2.5% overall increase in spending this year. Here's Shopify President Harley Finkelstein on Squawk on the Street this morning.
But one of the things that's very interesting is that sales made by merchants on Shopify using our point of sale system, which is in store, has grown by 33% since this period last year. So I don't think it's just online only. I think it's this intentionality where consumers want to buy from their favorite brands.
And our next guest sees more upside as Shopify continues to win share. Joining us is Ken Wong. He's an analyst at Oppenheimer. Ken, it's good to see you. And I should add, we're only talking about 10% upside for your price target, but what's your gut tell you?
Yeah, thank you for having me on. Look, I think a lot of the upside right now is dependent on what happens, kind of obviously Q4, looking out to fiscal 24. So with sentiment going into the holiday season, initially a little more cautious. Like I think these results definitely show that we could potentially be looking at upside to our numbers, likely upside to consensus numbers, which are looking for growth closer to 17% GMV, and they displayed 22% growth, as of Black Friday.
Wow. Did that number surprise you, up 22%? Is that, I know when they're in the early growth stages, we'd be like, yeah, of course. But just give me some context around that figure.
Yeah, it's definitely a bit of a surprise. Consensus expectations were for the fourth quarter GMV to be closer to 17%. I think we had been hearing from merchants, from partners, and even from consumers that a lot of shopping was starting earlier in the holiday season than just purely during this Black Friday, Cyber Monday stretch. So our expectations were potentially that it would come in a little light of the 17% that people were expecting. So to see a 22% number, definitely, meaningfully higher than anticipated. And I think some of this is also not purely just online. Right, we noticed that on POS, which is their kind of retail product, we saw growth actually accelerate to 33% from 27% last year. So clearly, this is more of a Shopify thing than just purely a retail dynamic.
Not to go on a tangent, but it is. So I never think of Shopify as being something I'd experience in store. But the fact that their in-store volumes, point of sale volume, were up 33% when we know in-store traffic or sales were only up, I think, 1.1%. Overall, tell me, where would I encounter Shopify at the checkout? Would I know as the consumer?
Yeah. I think as a consumer, you probably wouldn't realize it, but I think some of the consumers' favorite brands, whether it's Allbirds or Warby Parker, they have both a big online and an offline presence now. I think what's more important is Shopify is no longer just a platform for, let's say, online first, hybrid second. Over the last 18 months, we've seen a much bigger push to just pure offline retailers. So this is something that, again, I think the trend is still early, but we shouldn't just purely think of these guys as an e-commerce direct-to-consumer type of a play.
Right. Sometimes I think, it benefits them if we think of them that way instead of something more traditional, but I totally take your point. Let me ask, as you, across the rest of your coverage space, what are your big conclusions coming out of Black Friday, basically Cyber Monday now?
Look, I think it should be a net positive for companies levered to online sales, e-commerce. We also cover some more down market competitors in Wix and Squarespace, GoDaddy. I assume that they likely are also seeing kind of more upbeat sales trends. Further up market, we have BigCommerce. They also put out some Black Friday, Cyber Monday details that suggest double-digit growth on their platform. Across that entire group, and I assume some in the e-commerce world, should probably see a bit of an uplift based on what we saw over the weekend.
And finally, how much more is, when people are looking through the numbers and going, wow, 8.5%, to me, it feels like, well, yeah, we're still at such a nascent stage of market share growth or penetration of online to in-store that we should still expect to see numbers at least that strong, I would think. But maybe I'm being too blasé. I mean, how much more sort of runway is there for these online players to grow in terms of the total retail market in this country?
Yeah, that's a great question. Right now, as a percent of retail mix in the U.S., they're still in the high teens. I imagine that we should continue to see that penetration number move up, at least into the 40-50% over time.
Wow.
So I don't think offline retail is completely going away, but clearly, from a consumer user perspective, like whether it's on your phone, your tablet, your PC device. I think we're finding that more and more consumers are purchasing off the couch than in store. And I think more importantly for Shopify, it's not just purely a growth dynamic. Right? This is the first year they're going to have profitability. We're assuming that by fiscal 24, they might be looking at mid-teens margins, $1 billion of cash flow, and that number should continue to grow and attract a different investor profile than just purely a growth-oriented mindset.
No, I think I read that something like half of the online purchases Black Friday were made on a smartphone, which makes sense. That's where we are. We're on the couch. That's what we're doing. Ken, thanks so much for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
Ken Wong of Oppenheimer.